Can I test with someone who's got audio? I've got no sound at the moment. I can see people in video, but just want to make sure that I'm on, I can be heard.
Yep, can you hear me? Okay, welcome. Okay, I'm going to start. Hopefully we're going to have a few more people who are going to arrive. That's okay. So welcome everybody who's here in person. We also have an audience that's online. So welcome to the virtual audience as well. So on behalf of the EPC and the US mission to the EU, I would like to welcome you all to this policy dialogue. And the topic of today's policy dialogue is Black Sea security after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Where do we stand? This is a good question. I want to start with a recent quote from a US official, because I think he put it quite well. Assistant US Secretary of State, James O'Brien, recently pointed out that the fate of the Black Sea is linked to that of Ukraine and Europe. And I think this is precisely true. Now, if we go back in time, over the last few years or even longer, I would say that the Black Sea has actually never received the attention that it actually deserved, whether that be from the EU or NATO. There's never been an effective Black Sea strategy. I don't think there's ever been a proper Black Sea strategy at all, certainly not from NATO, but from other actors as well. Unfortunately, the Russians did have a strategy. And when we look back now, we can see that we, the West, if I may be so blunt, almost sleepwalked into the catastrophic Russian militarization of the Black Sea, occupied Crimea by the Kremlin. I mean, these things happened, among other things, in the Black Sea, and there was little or no reaction to these developments at all. And as we know, these developments were the harbinger, if I could say so, to Russia's 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I mean, there was many elements that played a role, but certainly the occupation of Crimea, the militarization of the Black Sea, and the inability of the West to push back against Russia during the first phase of the war certainly played a role. Now, since the start of the second phase of this war, the full-scale invasion, Russia has repeatedly attacked Ukrainian infrastructure, ports, etc., on the Black Sea coast, not least Odessa, killing thousands and thousands of innocent civilians, including children. It has also tried to enforce a blockade of the Black Sea, preventing freedom of navigation, while at the same time threatening international airspace frequently. I think back in 2022, there was almost an incident where a UK jet was almost shot down. And that didn't happen, but just by sheer luck. We've seen an undermining of the security of the littoral states. And of course, as is well known to everybody, efforts to try and stop Ukrainian grain being exported to the world market. I mean, the Russians pulled out of the grain initiative earlier this year. There's now been put in place what is called the humanitarian corridor, which is now actually getting grain to the world markets, but not at the same level there was before. And obviously, this is not the optimal scenario, and the security threats around that remain very real, including the hundreds of thousands of mines that the Russians have put into the Black Sea. So we can see we have a lot of challenges, and we have a great panel of experts with us here today to discuss this, who I'm going to briefly introduce. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting my English there. First of all, on my far right, Neil Melvin, who is Director of International Security Program at the Royal United Services Institute, otherwise known as RUSI, which is probably well known to all of you in the UK. With us today online, I hope you can hear me well, is Gordon Skip Davis, who is a retired Major General in the US Army. He's also Senior Fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis in Washington, but resides in Italy. So welcome to you, Skip. It's very nice to have you with us again. Still on my right, Giray Sadik, who was Chair in the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Political Science, and Director of European Studies Research Center at Ankara Yildirim Beyazıt University. Welcome. Hoş geldiniz. To you. Ionela Ciolan, my former colleague actually here at EPC, and who is now a research officer at the Wilfried Martens Center just down the road, and who is a very good expert on Black Sea for many years. Welcome to you, Ionela. And last but certainly not least, our good Ukrainian friend, Hennadiy Maksak, who's Executive Director of the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism. So welcome to all of you. I'm sure we're going to have a really great discussion here today. So I want to start with you, Neil. Maybe the obvious question to begin with. Can you give us, in a sort of snapshot, a picture of the current security situation in the Black Sea and how it's impacting the regional, the broader region?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I mean, I think if you look at on the sort of eastern flank of NATO and looking ahead in regards to Russia, we are faced with two key sub-regions that constitute the main threat. One is the high north, the Arctic and the Baltic region, and the second one is the Black Sea region, and that they're interlinked. The high north is a relatively simple security region, particularly with Finnish NATO membership and Sweden on track. Because we'll have a unified Euro-Atlantic response to Russia. The Black Sea, and this is, I think, goes to the heart of what Amanda was saying, as there hasn't really been a strategy, is the most complex security region that the Euro-Atlantic community faces for a number of reasons. One is, of course, centrally the Ukraine war, which is the culmination of this long-term Russian strategy to take a domination or reassert a Russian domination of the Black Sea as part of its broader strategy to reassert Russia as a global actor, as a leading regional force, but also as a force that's able to project power beyond the Black Sea into the East Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. So actually gaining control of the Black Sea for the Russians is not just about Ukraine or even Georgia, but it's actually about its wider global ambitions. And so there has been this joined up approach, particularly under President Putin, beginning with the Second Chechen War, with the 2008 Russia-Georgia War, with Russia's security relationship to Armenia, and its relationship to Ukraine, then with the first Russia-Ukraine war, 2014, and now with the second one underway. It's also a complicated space then because it's precisely brings together a lot of different actors. That there's a stronger NATO presence, and in terms of understanding the current security environment, NATO has now stepped up its presence. So if in the beginning of the second Russia-Ukraine war, NATO had a relatively light presence in the region as a result of the Madrid and last summer's Vilnius NATO summits, we now have a commitment to extend NATO battle groups into the region. And there's one in Romania, one in Bulgaria, Slovakia, Hungary. So we have a whole line now of NATO battle groups and a commitment to bring those up to brigade size, if not actually deployed at brigade size, the ability to bring a brigade formation fairly quickly. And as a result of the Vilnius summit, commitments to regional security plans, which include large-scale reinforcement. So a lot sort of the ambition to actually have an ability to mobilize up to 300,000 troops from NATO within a certain time period to come in to backstop these forces on the eastern flank. So on the one side, there's that important change. There's also on the NATO side the important change that Romania, particularly, has committed to a modernization of its armed forces, or stepping up a modernization, and Bulgaria, which has tended to lag quite significantly, is also undergoing some sort of modernization. But then the space is particularly complicated because we have NATO, but we also have non-NATO. We have Russia and Belarus. We have Ukraine, we have the South Caucasus. Some of those are more inclined to NATO than others, but we have a mix then of NATO, non-NATO, and within the non-NATO different positions. But also the position within NATO is made more complex by Turkey's position on the Black Sea. A key NATO ally certainly controls access to the maritime space through its management of the Montreux Convention, and it's closed the Black Sea to NATO warships and Russian warships too, as a result of this war. But also having a sort of a historical managed competition with Russia that is keen to maintain Turkey's leading role in the region, perhaps alongside Russia to some degree, and not have other major actors, international actors, take a leading role in the Black Sea. So this has also been why it's difficult to get a NATO strategy for the Black Sea, because Turkey has always felt that that was a particular interest to it. Then sort of extending it, we also have a distinction between the maritime space and the littoral areas. So the war, one of the successes of the current war is that the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which was a key instrument to attain Russia's goal of dominating the region, has been significantly denuded and even pegged back. So we're seeing that Russia is being forced to redeploy some of its Black Sea forces. It's lost some significant ones, but they're being redeployed to sort of backstopping in Russian ports, but also trying to create new ports in occupied parts of Georgia and Abkhazia to sort of deepen their battle space. But that pegging back of the Marine force has allowed what Amanda said, the food security issue to advance, because Russia's not able to project its power across the Black Sea as we saw before. But then beyond the littoral spaces, there are these key hinterlands. Now, Ukraine is the central hinterland for the Black Sea maritime space, hence Russia's ambition to control that. I think we have to be frank that the counteroffensive has failed in terms of the ambitions that were set out at the beginning of it in the spring, both in terms of maximalist ambitions, which was for Ukraine to be able to reach or at least break the connection between Russia and the land bridge between Crimea, but even perhaps in lesser ambitions to reach Tokmak, which might have been, I think, quite conceivable. So there's been a very high attrition of Ukrainian forces. They fought very bravely, but they haven't been able to reclaim those significantly larger territories. So we face now realistically a long-term war, at least into 2025. Next year is probably likely to see Ukraine involved in active defense and trying to reconstitute its military, and realistically then being able to sort of take the fight back to the Russians in the spring of 2025. The Russians also have tried quite hard recently, but they have severe limitations as well. So they probably aren't in a position to break through on the battle space. So I think we're facing this a stalemate, but by a stalemate, I don't mean that there's nothing happening. It's a kind of dynamic stalemate. The war continues, that the front lines continue to move, but there's relatively little shifts in the positions, and that's likely to stay through much of 2024. And perhaps I'll just wrap up on this and sort of understanding the region. And then we have these other key spaces, such as the South Caucasus, which is semi-detached from the current war in Ukraine, but nonetheless crucial to the Black Sea, and the Balkans, which constitutes another core space. So all of this, I think, is why we've struggled to have a common strategy for this region, because all of these different parts are central to the Black Sea region, but in some ways quite disconnected from each other. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Neil. I think this was a very good overview of the current security dynamic in the Black Sea region, from an analyst perspective, I can put it that way. But I want to now give the floor to Skip, who's obviously been a practitioner. He's been in the military, so I never know whether to look at this side or that side or no side. To give your insights, Skip. I mean, in terms of the actual military dynamic in the Black Sea, particularly perhaps looking at the evolving NATO approach, but I would also like you to touch on the evolving Russian strategy, because Neil just mentioned that he considers that Russia, to a certain degree, has been pushed back in the Black Sea, that its Black Sea fleet has been downgraded. Would you agree with this? To what extent does Russia still remain a serious threat in the Black Sea? To what extent has the Black Sea fleet actually been destroyed? I mean, they obviously still have many submarines and whatnot. And what do you think should be, I mean, in this new dynamic, the approach from NATO to this?
Okay, thanks, Amanda. First off, let me sign up almost wholeheartedly to what I think Neil has described and painted up in terms of the broad picture of the Black Sea issues at present. And what I'd like to do is put this a little bit in context from the NATO point of view. I would agree that NATO has not developed a Black Sea strategy for a number of reasons, probably foremost of which has been Turkey's pushback on the need for one, simply because they saw the measures to enable Black Sea security as sufficient and not necessarily pressing to the point of needing a separate Black Sea strategy when there was already other higher priority issues to address. That said, I think the time has come now, certainly we've seen with the Vilnius summit, that a Black Sea strategy will be developed by NATO, and Turkey's on board with it. So you rightly said I'll bring a bit of a military view, but I've also spent the last several years as a NATO diplomat before I retired in 2021, tracking the issues in Ukraine before the second invasion, and then as a military officer in charge of operations intelligence during the first invasion, illegal annexation, start of the Civil War in the Donbass, etc. So if we take a step back, the Black Sea has been an area of heightened tension and frankly frozen conflicts for some time. And I think what we're now seeing is it's become de facto NATO's top focus for deterrence of and defense against Russia. And I think Neil talked about the High North, but I would separate the High North from the Black Sea. I'm sorry, from the Baltic Sea. There's they're looked at as two separate geographic areas and theaters with respect to NATO. But nonetheless, at the moment, the priority is the Black Sea region, not High North and Baltic area. And after Russia's invasion, and illegal annexation of Crimea, and military support to the civil war in Donbass in 2014, NATO enacted a whole series of assurance and deterrence measures that started with an initial uplift, in terms of air, land, maritime, presence in the region, all increased training and exercise activities focused on enabling reinforcement, enabling multinational cooperation in the area, also cooperation with Ukraine and Georgia, primarily Ukrainian Navy and Georgian land forces. And then also there was some establishment of some new NATO force structure in terms of multinational division south, east, and multinational brigade, et cetera, that occurred before February 22. Now, let's take a look at NATO's actions since the second invasion. A lot of things have happened. Allies activated for the first time graduated defense plans that had been conceived back in 2014, which included two regional plans focused on the southeast. They alerted, deployed, and then transferred authority, national forces to sack Europe, which included land and air forces primarily, but also maritime forces in the Mediterranean Sea, which could reach the Black Sea. They also significantly increased the operational flights of AWACS and their Global Hawks, the Allied ground surveillance, to increase situational awareness, some of which that data was shared with Ukraine for its ability to push back the Russian aggression. NATO also condemned the Russian aggression. They coordinated actions to pressure and punish Russia outside NATO with respect to EU and G7. And then I think importantly, Turkey invoked the Montreux Convention few days after the start of the war and closed access to Black Sea to Russian warships that were not already in the Black Sea. That was the primary focus, not necessarily NATO ships. It was to focus on basically restricting the ability of Russia to bring back ships that it had actually deployed in the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, in support of Syrian actions, back into the Black Sea. So I think that was a good action. It was certainly one that did not please Putin, and it was certainly one that, interesting enough, Russia has not challenged since it was invoked. Now, at Madrid last year, NATO agreed a new strategic concept, which had a number of key implications for the Black Sea. First of which was, they agreed to adopt and embrace a deterrence by denial concept. That's significant, which means NATO has to have the forces at the readiness and the right capabilities to prevent Russia from achieving objectives of aggression against NATO allies. That's significant. Of course, Russia was identified as the most direct threat and one of two key threats against NATO. That's the first time that they've publicly stated that, even though that's been in their strategy since 2019. NATO also strengthened their forward presence. Neil talked about additional battle groups, along with the Vilnius decision to uplift those to brigades as appropriate. That's still to be seen. Get France and Italy as kind of the lead nations, in Bulgaria and Romania, respectively, but then also U.S. brigade, a rotational brigade now that's been established since the invasion. And then, of course, NATO agreed a new force model, a vastly increased numbers of forces from 30,000 NATO response force to 300,000 in the NATO force model that would be available to reinforce defense of NATO writ large. Now, that's not all in the Southeast, that's writ large. And the regional plans, 3, North, Center, South, have been agreed upon. South is not just Black Sea, it's also Mediterranean. But significantly is that a number of additional nations, other than the literal forces, little nations in Black Sea, have agreed to commit forces to reinforcing defense in the Black Sea region. What's more important, I think, is that NATO has now agreed to exercise those plans. That's been part of the Vilnius decisions. They have continued to increase the capabilities available to Black Sea security. They've also agreed a whole series of cooperative capability programs. The European Sky Shield Initiative, which is about buying, ground-based air defense, given the significant Russian capabilities, but also maritime capabilities, which are very pertinent to maritime security in Black Sea. Also the digital ocean concept, which is a way to integrate civil and military capabilities below the surface, seabed, subsurface, sea surface, and then of course above the sea to improve maritime situational awareness. And then with respect to Ukraine, a whole bunch of things have happened. You know, you've got the elimination of the membership action plan. You've got the comprehensive assistance package. You've got the NATO Ukraine Council, which has now already been held, 3 times since it was established. And then a whole series of tailored support packages to Ukraine to assist in its ability to push back on Russia. Let me talk about lessons learned before I go into the Russian strategy. I think first off, what NATO has learned from this war since February 22 is that one, NATO can deter Russia from aggression against allies. Okay? But Russia is only deterred by actions, not words. That said, Article 5 of the Washington Treaty is significant and matters to Russia. Russia military is highly capable, it's highly lethal, but it's not the effective force that allies perceived it to be prior to 2022. And Russia's ability but that said, Russia's ability to strike at range, to its frankly lack of restraint in killing civilians, attacking civilian infrastructure, its resilience in the face of sanctions, the ability to adjust, its income from energy with other clients, its mobilization of its own industry, its ability to continue to mobilize manpower in the face of high attrition. All of those have significant implications for NATO, deterrence and defense, but also resilience. But then again, I think we've also, as Neil implied, Ukraine has demonstrated that it has the capacity, even though it's a very small nation, 1/4 the size of Russia in terms of manpower and much less military capability, to defeat Russia's initial aims. It's been able to push them back, fend off continued offensive action, regain a significant amount of a territory, and then of course leverage Western support extremely effectively and efficiency. And I think that what that's taught us is that willpower, political, public, and military, but also the importance of military leadership, doctrine, and tactics, which we already understood. But then the public-private defense innovation that's been so vibrant in Ukraine has had a multiplying effect in its ability to defend against Russia, push back Russia. And although it hasn't been able to achieve its aims from the counteroffensive, we could probably attribute that to many factors, not necessarily due to Ukraine's willingness and to fight and to push forward. The other thing I think is that has come out of this is the importance of supporting Ukraine to European security. And I think, as James O'Brien had said, how the importance of Black Sea strategy and security is a function of Ukraine and broader Europe. Well, to Europe, Ukraine's security is central to its ability to defend against Russian aggression, and frankly, to uphold the rules-based order and many other things that are near and dear to Western democracies. And if we allow Russia to win, we're going to basically put NATO credibility at risk. We're going to set the conditions for further Russian aggression and, frankly, continued instability in that region. So Black Sea matters.
Can I ask you to wrap up in a second? Thank you.
Sure. I'm near the end. I would say that just 2 other things. The other key area of lessons learned for us has been that defense investments is required to develop and deliver the kinds of capabilities we need, NATO needs, to maintain the right kinds of forces at the right level and the right equipment to defer against or to defend against a peer or near peer adversary like Russia, and that we've got a lot of work to do in many areas. The other thing is that allies have got to cooperate more in terms of defense planning, capability development, procurement, force integration, interoperability standards, training, readiness, a whole slew of things that they're already focused on. So I'll stop there. I'm glad to take more questions. I didn't talk about Russia's strategy, but I'm glad to come back to that.
Yeah, we can definitely come back to that in a second. And thanks to you, Skip, for this excellent analysis as well. And you have really, I think, demonstrated NATO's, its evolving approach towards the region. And hopefully there's more to come, quite honestly, yeah. But we can come back to that shortly. But I mean, you also mentioned Turkey, and Neil also mentioned Turkey. Not in a great sense, saying that Turkey is the actor that is behind the failure to have a proper Black Sea security strategy. So, of course, now that's the opportune moment to turn to you, Giray, to hear your, views on how do you see Turkey's doctrine into the Black Sea. Why does Turkey not want to have this strategy, and what are the objectives of Turkey in the Black Sea?
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks for all that organization. I speak as a scholar, so in personal capacity, not in the name of Turkey, but it's very important to approach that lessons learned mindset as with general. Broadly speaking, we are on the same page because there are a number of lessons that need to be learned. And one of them, as Neil alluded, is that we are facing a war marathon. So it's likely to take longer than expected. And therefore, we need to think for long-term and more strategic rather than sporadic and ambiguous. Why I said that? It was a recent report saying that Russian Black Sea strategy was more calculated, strategic, and long-term, and whereas the NATO or Western efforts are more sporadic, ambiguous, and divided. Americans say, united we stand, divided we fail. Well, and you know the saying, the victory has many fathers, the failure is orphan. And when it comes to NATO or lack of action or lack of Black Sea strategy, as we all agree, it's easy to blame it on Turkey. But I think requires a more nuanced understanding of the situation. And I hope my remarks can help to improve that understanding and appreciation of Turkish position and efforts. So, to begin with, the relations of Turkey in the Black Sea have always been part of relations with Russia, Ukraine, and regional countries, but related with what's going on with the West. So if there are some problems with the West, with the US and European allies, they are one way or another reflected into relations with Russia and overall Turkey's willingness to cooperate on Black Sea matters. And that is important to see the reassurance of this. So that is why when it comes to Black Sea, Turkey aims to present and to have solidarity and unity among allies. So that's number one. Also addressing General's remarks, I'd like you to think for a moment. Think about without Turkey. Do you think you see a united NATO strategy about the Black Sea? Or, for example, Turkey is not a member of European Union. Do you have united EU when it comes to Ukraine? Ask yourself. Then you'll see that Turkey is not the problem, or without Turkey, all problems are not solved. But let me tell you, without Turkey, there are no solutions forthcoming. So that is important to bear in mind when we make our assessments to avoid any false assumptions. So that is number one. Number two, about general false assumptions, Russia responds to force, not to words. Well, that is correct. But it's one of the basic premises of international relations, as I'm IR professor. Actions speak louder than words. So even for way smaller actors, think about that. Do you think Armenia responds to words or world peace and so on? No. Until you see that action forthcoming, then only after that you see some developments in the field. So we have to bear in mind overall the regional security complex in the White Sea, in the wider Black Sea region, ranging from Balkans to Caucasus and to Eastern Mediterranean. And here, Turkey, I must note, is the country with the longest coast to Black Sea and in the Eastern Mediterranean as well. On top of that, Turkey controls Turkish straits, therefore it's a gatekeeper for Black Sea. This is basic geopolitics. And those are, so to speak, give certain powers to Turkey, but there is a Superman saying, great power comes with great responsibility. And here it comes not without any strings attached. And to manage that, there is Montreux Convention from 1936, which predates NATO and UN system and so on. And as all international conventions, until you have the better one, you have to rely with what you have at hand. And here, Turkey needs a better understanding from countries of the region and allies. While Turkey advocates that states need to act in accordance with international law in Black Sea, Montreux Convention is part of that. And here, there are two essential aims: to avoid escalation and to avoid spillover. Well, when it comes to Ukraine, after the war, in about a year, escalation is already at the top. We cannot talk about it. That's realistic. And that's why the strategy of regional ownership of Turkey has become increasingly difficult to maintain due to a Russian attack on Ukraine after February 22. But when it comes to spillover, meaning to avoid any spillover of Ukraine war to Black Sea NATO allies, especially Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania, we can talk about relative success on this, with the exception of mine incidents and with the exception of recent drone accidents, let's say for now, in quote, in Izmail and ports of Danube of Romania. So in both of them, Turkey not only that maintains Montreux, but actively contributes, and in a very meaningful fashion, to NATO allies' security. With Romania recently, Turkey leads air policing. The next 4 months, it will be under Turkish control to guard the allied skies over Romania. Turkey also leads the NATO mine countermeasures group, which is together with allies of Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria. So as you see, actions speak louder than words, but those actions don't need to be always military or so more war, more escalation, more weapons does not always make for more security. So we need to be thinking about that in terms of defense capacity building. That includes also to consider Turkish defense industry advancements. Turkey also provides, there are recent agreements of drones to Romania and other NATO allies also, but around Black Sea, Romania is most relevant one. And also that regional ownership after the war can be reframed to fit better to realities. That was also related with Amanda's earlier questions. Let me read from recent report an important quote. After the war, quote, bolstering cooperation among the 3 riparian NATO states, Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania, together with partner nations, Georgia and Ukraine, will transform Turkey's original regional ownership ideal to a more realistic endeavor while keeping it Montreux Convention friendly. So That is the bottom line where we stand. Above all, NATO is established by the allies, for the allies, so NATO members should come first for any arrangement that we can think of to make them more sustainable, to preserve alliance coherence, and ultimately to have a meaningful deterrence and to bring allies when it's necessary to bring on board. Another allied effort, Turkey hosts NATO Maritime Security Center of Excellence in Istanbul. Among the long coastline, having that center in Istanbul is a clear indication of Turkey contributing to Black Sea security via Turkish Straits, but also to NATO efforts in that regard. That is also important to note. While ending, I will end here with still putting it very briefly. Turkey is still best positioned in terms of mediation efforts, so far with limited success, grain deal and POV exchanges, but that can be a starter for confidence building measures and others. I can open up more in Q&A. Thank you again.
Thank you, Giray. I certainly would have some questions to come back to vis-a-vis Turkey, including Turkey ties with Russia and how that is played out vis-a-vis the Black Sea. But I want to come now to Hennadiy, who is with us from Ukraine, who can share a Ukrainian perspective on these issues, to hear your evaluation of what well, NATO, I don't just like to say NATO, but the allies actually have done to support Ukraine in the Black Sea, where Ukraine, let's be frank, has had a dreadful time, to put it mildly, and also to elaborate on what Ukraine itself has been doing, because Ukraine has done an awful lot, especially in the last weeks and months, to actually push back against Russia. I mean, particularly using drones and naval drones or other aerial vehicles. I mean, these have become really crucial to Ukraine's defensive abilities in the sea. And what more you would like to see from the allies, and that includes at the forthcoming NATO summit. You know, Ukraine didn't get really a clear picture of membership in Vilnius. Unfortunately, it's still, you know, this still has to be nailed down. What is your strategy ahead of the Washington summit?
Dear Amanda, thank you so much for this possibility to share my observations about Black Sea security. I think it's a very important issue for Ukraine, and let me just provide some retrospective, just short in Twitter style, but still it is important to understand how events unfolded in the region. And we'll try not to overlap with already presented issues about NATO presence in the region at the moment, but rather try to put or address Russian strategy prior to big war and Ukrainian response and Ukrainian capabilities at the moment. So as it was already pointed out, Russia always tried to play it central with Black Sea, and it was always part of its strategic approach, strategic posture, be it militarily and politically, for two dimensions. The first one, to influence the littoral states in the Black Sea basin, and the other is to project its military might, geopolitical might in Mediterranean and further down. So I would say it was very important for them to take control of the Crimea. And I think it was also embodied in all this very disputable step, which was done by President Yanukovych back in 2010, when Kharkiv agreements were signed about further prolongation of extension of a period for hosting of Russian Navy in Sevastopol. So I think it was already a big issue for Russia at that time, and that's why when 2014 came with political turmoil in Kiev, Russia was so easy to occupy Crimea. As it was ironical, but still real history told by former Foreign Minister Deshitsa. The first round of negotiations back then in 14, there was an occasion they appeared both he and Lavrov in one elevator with no other person. And when he asked, why did you occupy Crimea? Lavrov said, it's so easy. You occupied Kiev, we occupied Crimea. So as simple as that for them, they were prepared and a lot of effort was put under this issue. And after this, I would say Russia tried to play hard to disrupt freedom of navigation, to create bubbles of area denial. And I think it was very obvious in 2017 when Azov Sea was blocked. When it was obvious that Russia wants to destroy all the trade routes Ukraine had from the sea and to just make it like its own domestic lake. From that period till 2021, I think Russia buttressed up its military might in Crimea, and Ukraine was very vocal, telling about militarization of this peninsula, and that it was a forepost for conventional and potentially nuclear arsenal of Russia to project its influence in the region. And I think that's why the Southern Military District was the one which was advanced when it comes to capabilities, multi-capabilities, and manpower. That's why in 2022, it was so easy for Russia to take over big parts of Ukrainian territory from the south. And now it is so easy for us to regain this territory because it is heavily fortified and mined. So all this just to project how it is important for Russia to take control of Crimea as a key to Black Sea control, as the key to Black Sea security. And Ukraine is a literal state, but it's not a maritime power, we understand, due to different reasons. Back to big war, it was uneasy because of our economic potential to create an effective Navy strategy to have some capabilities in the region. But I would say for Ukraine at that moment, it was a big, peaceful trade route. Around 60% of export revenues came via our transport routes of Black Sea, in Black Sea. So it was a huge sum of money for grain, for some raw materials. And I think it was important for Ukraine to preserve this situation. So since the occupation, Ukraine was vocal on two points. First one, militarization of Crimea, which is a big threat to European Union, to NATO, to all allies and partners. And next one, how to preserve freedom of navigation. I think on both counts with a big war, situation has changed drastically. And now I think that, I mean, you're right that we have gained some resilience in Black Sea, although we're still vulnerable from sea and our territorial land is attacked using submarines, using warships in Black Sea. It was our capability just to deter or just to expel Russia from natural ports in Crimea, and it is a good sign at the moment. I would say at the moment, because I will come back to this issue in a moment. And next, as you mentioned, Ukraine managed somehow, although there is no big international agreement, to reinvigorate or to create this humanitarian corridor and to somehow try to give confidence and trust to our partners that this corridor could be used just to reinvigorate trade between Ukraine and partners, and maybe just to be helpful as a big international player on in food security. But as I said for a moment, and it is very problematic because it was said by my colleagues, we are entering war of attrition. And for us, it is quite difficult at the moment to outline the horizon of this war. And in these circumstances, we see that even these deterrents we create with unmanned vessels we have in our possession, it is not the long-term solution. As we see with aerial unmanned vehicles. Russia tries to scale up its production, and now it outnumbers Ukraine on a number of levels of front. Being able to product and to push some money in this process, I think for Russia it will be also possible to just regain the control or dominance in the region, trying to play with his electronic warfare, trying just to outnumber us in this maritime unmanned vessel. So it is still a big problem, because otherwise even this fragile humanitarian corridor would be under big threat. So what I think is important for Ukrainian position to present, and maybe it would be a mantra from our side, but I think it's very important. The key to Black security is Crimea. Liberation of Crimea is the first tangible step somehow to reshuffle the situation in the region and try to project some regional approaches with NATO participation, with EU increased interest to the region. But I think without it, it would be quite difficult. So in this respect, I would rather mention that Ukraine expects from our partners 3 layers of support. Under Rammstein, I think it is still important to have long-range missiles which are capable to destroy Kerch Bridge. This is also mantra, but it's not for us only symbolic significance. It is a significant route for military supplies to Crimea military units from Rostov region, and basically being destroyed, it just cuts a big portion of military support for Russia in Crimea Peninsula. Next, so I think this is why the discussion about Taurus, about other long-range missiles is quite timely, and we have to be frank to our partners. We need them quite urgently. Next, security guarantees. In this equation, it is important to mention that Black Sea guarantees, even for this humanitarian corridor, are quite vital for Ukraine. And if our partners could present any kind of support in this way, either air defense system or some warships to guard these cargo vessels, it could be also part of guarantees which Ukraine also will support with great comprehension, and it would be very important for us. And next point, I would say, let's put Crimea in peace formula framework. When it comes to food security, food safety, food security, when it comes to nuclear security, I think it is important for us to pay attention to the situation which is unfolding in the peninsula, and how for us it would be possible to counteract this position and to create a build international coalition. I will leave it here for a moment.
Okay, thank you, Hennadiy. You raised some very important points there, including regarding this humanitarian corridor and the need to reinforce the security around that corridor. And I want to bring this question actually to you, Ionela. I mean, you and I have worked on the Black Sea issue together, but just to follow on what Hennadiy was saying, do you think there is political will, or it's possible to actually have the sort of, let's say, warship protecting this corridor? Is that something that's likely to happen anytime soon? I mean, I'm guessing from one of the littoral states. I mean, Romania, Bulgaria. I think we can Turkey as well, but that's not for you. And also, we've talked a lot about NATO, but perhaps you could also give us a sort of insight on what more the EU can actually do to build the resilience here and help with security in the Black Sea, as this is an area that you've researched extensively.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here. To start briefly with your first question, obviously there is an interest both of the United Nations and also in the US and in the region in order to make sure that the grain deal it's still continuing. And we are seeing that Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey are trying to find alternative routes how to transport the grains from Ukraine to these countries and then to the whole region and other parts of the region where the Syrians need to go. Currently, not sure if there is a political will to have these commercial vessels together with some military vessels that to protect them, because it also brings into the discussion the possibility of an accident, which might escalate the tensions, since one of these military vessels can be under the flag of one of the countries which is part of NATO. So this will actually become a really important issue, since the distrust among the allies in Russia, it's quite high currently. So not sure if we are having the political consensus there. But let's move to what the European Union does and what also Romania does, because I would like to bring into the discussion some of the elements which basically are on the security part, but looking at the economic, energy security elements where the European Union it's better equipped to work on. So what we know currently, it's the fact that the Black Sea region, it's basically the Achilles heel in the European Union strategy in the region. The Black Sea had a marginal role for the EU policy in the previous years. Brussels only look at the region from an economic, trade, energy, good transit point of view, and the policies that were done in Brussels towards the Black Sea were mostly locally focused, as we had the Eastern Partnership, where they had the bilateral focus, the strategic partnership with Turkey, where they were inefficient, as that Black Sea synergy from 2007-2008. So we see that before the start of the invasion, the European Union actorness was more inclined to this political and economic cooperation and conflict mediation. And we didn't have a viable EU security stance towards the region, but things are changing. And since last year with the strategic compass, we are seeing that the Black Sea was included finally as an area of strategic importance for the European Union. And now in the discussions that we are having about the economic security strategy of the European Union, we also have to keep in mind the strategic importance of the Black Sea. And here I'm lobbying and advocating for an economic security strategy of the European Union towards the Black Sea. And I will explain you why it's that important through various ideas. On one side, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia are currently negotiating their EU integration, and they are in various steps of integration. So basically, in the future, we'll see that the economical landscape of the Black Sea region is becoming more complex, and the European Union will have a bigger role and voice in the region. So it will be more important for the European Union to have a strategy towards the regional economic development. At the same time, while the EU will have to continue dealing with the Russian ongoing aggressive actions. Then next year, it's a very important year for the Europe in general, because we'll have many rounds of elections. We'll have the European Parliament elections, but we also have elections in Romania, in Moldova, possible elections in Ukraine as well. And basically we'll be dealing a lot with the foreign interference and disinformation campaign, either from Russia or China. So I feel like here the European Union is the best actor to help the countries in making sure that they are protected and their resilience is increased against this foreign interference in electoral processes. Then when it comes to the Black Sea, and what I would like to mention is the fact that the Black Sea has the potential to become a green energy hub. And this is very important in realizing the energy and also economic security potential of the countries in the region. It is also important for the discussions towards the reconstruction of Ukraine, because also Ukraine has a stance in this regional development. Several countries in the Black Sea region, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and also Ukraine, have a lot of gas potential in the Black Sea. In the previous years, we are starting to discuss about this gas sea exploitation. But currently, we have an issue with the gas sea exploitation because since Russia illegally occupied Crimea, that brought into the discussion the issue of a conflict overlapping exclusive economic zones between the littoral countries, and also an issue about who has the rights to exploit those resources in the Black Sea, since parts of the exclusive economic zones of Ukraine are overlapping with the ones of Romania and Turkey. And we saw that in the past 2 years, at least from Romanian and Turkish actors, they are more inclining to exploiting the gas reserves, because that will bring more energy independence to these countries, more revenue, and also basically will change the geopolitical and geoeconomical dynamics in the region. I will give you the example of Romania because it's more familiar with me. So basically, Romania has the ability to exploit 200 billion cubic meters of gas, which currently will make the country to be 100% energy independent, and will help to contribute with the increasing the energy gas supplies to the region, either to Bulgaria or Hungary or Republic of Moldova. So basically will change a lot the dynamics in the region. Then also when it comes to this idea of the Green Deal, because in Brussels we like to speak a lot about the Green Deal. The fact is that the Black Sea is one of the most important European areas to in terms of wind offshore production, and having the capacity to basically either to solar panel or to wind energy, which will be very important for the European Union in terms of its development and trying to basically help these countries to create the infrastructure, to create the legislation in order to start this project. But at the same time, while we have all these capabilities and this potential, we have to keep in mind that Russia will not stay on the sidelines and look at how the countries will try to exploit the energies and become more independent and economic and energy resilient. So they will try to push more pressure, so we'll see more hybrid threats from Russia. So that's why I believe that not only NATO, but also the European Union and the two organizations working together will be instrumental in protecting the region and also in fostering the regional economic development, but of the littoral countries, and also hopefully of the region per se, the extended Black Sea region. Thank you.
Thank you, and Ionela, and sorry for rushing you along. I want to go to the Q&A in a minute, but I just want to ask one more question to each of our guests and ask them to give a very short response. And I want to come back to you first, Skip, because I want to come back to what Hennadiy was saying about the liberation of Crimea and the destruction of the Kerch Strait. Ukrainians certainly have the ability to do this if they're given the right tools. Do you think that the allies are ready to give Ukraine the right tools to actually take this step, which would certainly be a game changer in the war?
Thanks. First off, I think the importance, as highlighted by Hennadiy, is absolutely spot on. the ability to threaten Crimea is of significant importance to Russia. I think Crimea, among all of its aims to retain and control Ukrainian territory, is at the top. It's including the land bridge, from eastern, or I should say western Russia, eastern Ukraine down to Crimea is extremely important for the long-term sustainability of the Black Sea Fleet and Black Sea Fleet structure in Crimea. So that's important for Russia. Therefore, it's extremely important as a target for Ukraine. And they've done extremely well with very limited resources, special operations forces, long-range strike, drones, etc., in terms of putting Crimea and infrastructure, including the first bridge, at risk. And so I think it's important for them to continue to pursue that. Frankly, they've got the wherewithal now with the means that have been provided by the Allies, with HIMARS, limited ATACMS, Storm Shadow, Scalp from the UK and French respectively, to strike Crimea infrastructure. Now, with longer ATACMS, with the Taurus missiles from Germany, they will be able to even strike farther. And I think the Allies should provide that, and have been, frankly, negligent not doing so to date. But that said, Ukraine has used its own capability, its own ballistic missiles, domestically produced, to put Crimea at risk, and that has caused Russia to basically abrogate aims that it had with the Black Sea Fleet to threaten, eastern Ukraine, Odessa, as well as to control the Black Sea in the vicinity of eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine. So, my hat's off to them with what they've done. So I would say let's continue to support them. That's a valid war aim. That's a significant war aim, and would go a long way to undermining Russia's ability to pursue its war aims against Russia.
Thanks,
Yes,
Skip.
Ukraine. Excuse me.
I just want to check, do we have any questions actually in the room and online? And let's take those, and then I can come back with my other questions, just to keeping an eye on the clock. Do you have? Yeah, Jana, go ahead and read them out, please.
Thanks, Amanda. So we have two questions from the online audience, and one is directed to General Davis. About the consideration of the Arctic Sea. It is in fact the closest geographical place between the main counterparts. What would be the challenges in this context? So this is one question, and the second question is directed to Mr. Sadik. What is your or Turkey's reflection as regards to the EU prioritizing Ukraine's EU membership prior to the one of Turkey? Thank you.
Do we have any questions in the room? Okay, Andre, I'll let you go ahead as well.
Much, Andrei Demeter, European Parliament staff. You will not be surprised, Amanda, that it is related to Turkey as well. My question would be, given the shift in position initially after the gruesome attacks of Hamas, Turkey wanted to reposition itself as a mediator. And then the discourse, the narrative changed quite rapidly. To what extent would you think that this would affect a future role in terms of the renewal of the grain deal, a future mediation role for Turkey, and now that its image, so to say, in the context of the crisis in the Middle East has been damaged as a mediator? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to put a question to Neil first before I come to you, actually, because it's about Georgia, because I don't think we can have this discussion without talking about Georgia, because it's a literal state. I mean, how important is it that Georgia gets candidate country status? I mean, how important is that we try to Europeanize to the largest extent the South Caucasus, but particularly Georgia, because it has this Black Sea coastline?
Thanks, Amanda. I mean, I think you're right that when I was setting out the nature of the region, I think that shows that you can't do a strategy for the Black Sea without taking account of all of those spaces. That this is what needs to, and this is why it's so difficult, because any kind of strategy needs to be interlinked. And Russia has done that. So they have pursued an interlinked strategy, and Georgia was one of the key aspects to that. So the 2008 Russia-Georgia war was not just about the politics between Georgia and Moscow at that point, but Russia was able to take control of the eastern littoral of the Black Sea as a result of that war. So its position taking Abkhazia and gradually incorporating Abkhazia has meant that, and destroying the rather small, but nonetheless, that there was a Georgian naval force, has made it quite difficult then for other forces to go into that region. So Russia's blocked off that part of the Black Sea. Taking the Crimea was the next step, where it then took the north sort of northeastern part and consolidated that. And the recent efforts that Russia has failed in fact, was to really extend that. The whole Snake Island operation would then have extended Russian capabilities actually even into NATO space, because from Snake Island they could have reached into Romania and further into the Black Sea. So we've seen a series of steps, and so Georgia is part of that, and so you can't leave Georgia isolated. I think this is why, perhaps if you want to talk about a Black Sea strategy, you need to think about Georgia in terms of how it contributes to what the key goals of such a strategy would be, and to me those goals would have to be about containing Russia, about deterring Russia, and about defending the other countries in the region. And so Georgia then becomes part of that equation for a number of reasons. First of all, because you can't contain Russia unless you can push it back into the northeastern maritime spaces. And so this whole new idea that Russia has just launched to create a naval facility on the basis of the former Soviet base in Abkhazia shows, in fact, it is a retreat from Crimea, but of course it's actually spreading Russia's depth of operation across the Black Sea. So we need to look at how Georgian interests can be reinforced around challenging that port, but also that Russian naval facility potentially challenges the plan to create a deep sea port on Georgia's coast as part of its ideas to have a middle corridor to bring in green energy from the Caspian Sea and to run an electric cable across the Black Sea from Georgia, bringing green energy from Azerbaijan and Georgia to European markets. So, again, you need to integrate this. It's going to be difficult to do the green energy transition in the Black Sea unless you could actually have security in the Black Sea. And so Georgia has to be part of that. So all of this is kind of a long way of saying that clearly Georgia is important. But I think one of the challenges that we have to also face up to is that the Europeanization agenda in the South Caucasus is a very difficult one now. I mean, it's been pushed back, and it's not just Russia, but it's other actors. Azerbaijan is redefining relations in the region. Iran is an important actor. China is looking to the region. And so Europe needs to be in the region, and I think trying to shape issues. And in fact, what the actual settlement that comes out of Karabakh, Europe and United States need to work together to be the actors that are facilitating that settlement, because that settlement will define the wider region. So I'm not sure it's a Europeanization agenda, but it's certainly a European interest to maintain a significant presence in the region. That may be our ambition, and to try and influence developments across the region in favor of that. And my last point is, I think that also brings us very much to Turkey, which is, a Black Sea strategy is critical to include Turkey. And we've had a bit of a decoupling, I think, of our interests from Turkey's interests in the region, and this is part of the problems that we face today. We have to find a strategy that relinks what Turkey wants to do in the region with the European security agenda in the region, because Turkey is now clearly a key actor in the South Caucasus. It's working with its partners in the region, and so we can't sort of look at just a Europeanization agenda without trying to take account of how Turkey is approaching that. And so to find interests in common again, to build that is going to be central to, I think, approaching a country like Georgia, because Turkey also has an important it has a land bridge to Georgia. It's the only NATO country that does have a land bridge to Georgia and sea bridge, of course. Well, there are others do have sea bridges potentially. And so if we're trying to contain Russia, all of this comes together, sort of Turkey, Georgia, and others in the Black Sea space.
I can follow up with this.
Yeah,
He left in a very good
no, you
place
can
because-
follow. No, this is also mentioned in the Borrell report. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. Neil, we are on the same page, so I will not repeat. Only to add this, also Turkey essential in terms of energy connectivity with Azerbaijan and Central Asia. That is really important when it comes to diversify from Russia and so on. So for energy security of Europe, Turkey is also very essential. And I come with the first question from the audience: why Ukraine, and what will be the Turkey in terms of EU enlargement? There are strong arguments in favor of Ukraine and Georgia, claiming that it's geopolitically driven. Okay, when you look to the map, I can't see better geopolitics than Turkey. So let's face it. And for the reasons also Neil alluded, you just stepped on it. Thank you. I'm glad we are on the same page, or how they say, great minds think alike. So I can add this question to be brief. And the second question about mediation. Sir, I think your question is very important in that respect. And that may be more relevant when it comes to discussing Turkish mediation efforts in the Middle East. As you know, mediators are supposed to have certain distance. But when it comes to mediation efforts vis-a-vis Ukraine, which is today's topic, I think they should be detached. They are not relevant, and Ukraine and Russia are not direct parties to the conflict, as Turkey is also not direct party. Having said that, addressing your question, I cannot think, and if you have suggestions, I am open to different panelists, a better alternative to be mediator between Ukraine and Russia than Turkey. This is my personal opinion as a scholar of geopolitics, international affairs. Why I said this? First of all, Turkey enjoys both relations with both countries. And second, I will cut short, Amanda, grain deal and POV exchanges, so far limited success, but the only success story in terms of mediation. This can pave the way for confidence building measures and ceasefire maybe later. Only thing, last remark, Turkey needs support from its NATO allies and EU, what EU can do in that endeavor. If support is not forthcoming, at least not to make things difficult.
Thank you, and thank you for being brief. Maybe I can come back to you, Hennadiy, about this issue of grain, because it seems to me that the actual UN initiative is dead. I'm not sure if it's ever going to get resuscitated, but it's key to get, grain from Ukraine. This is the project of President Zelensky to the market is vital. So do you consider the recent summit that took place in Kiev as having positive conclusions in terms of more international support to get more grain from Ukraine to those that need it the most? I mean, what was the main takeaway from this summit? And I would ask you to be very brief.
Thank you, Amanda. Very brief. I think it is a positive sign of the second summit. We have extension of participants from 26 to 38, which is significant because basically it's quite sensitive initiative, which is engaged with some risk when it comes to Black Sea routes of grain. But at the same time, it also positive in terms of financial support, which is generated for this transportation. We are quite optimistic in these circumstances about the increase of the volumes of the grain transported via sea routes. Let's hope we have security preconditions in place. And also would like to see more interest and political will from some member states of EU to unblock or facilitate our land routes to our markets. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I just want to stick with Ionela for a moment, again, on this grain corridor, because landmines or sea mines have been a significant problem for Ukraine and continue to be. But you have this new task force, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria, which, if it hasn't started, is going to start imminently. Do you think this is something that can be built on to further increase the security in the region? I mean, in terms of regional cooperation.
Yes,
very briefly.
Very briefly, yes, this is the plan. The fact that the two countries are also NATO allies and NATO Secretary General was involved basically in this project shows that NATO as an organization is interested in restoring the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea and making sure that we have safe transit corridors for also for sending the Ukrainian cereals to the world, but also making sure that these mines are not reaching the littoral land of the NATO countries, or are not affecting, the critical infrastructure in the Black Sea, or are not affecting the gas exploitation processes which are happening. Because in Romania, we had a lot of discussions in the media from the energy companies who are speaking about the fact that there are a lot of mines around these areas where Romania is basically exploiting its gas, or it's in the process of trying to basically develop the infrastructure to further exploit its gas in this Neptune Deep in the Black Sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ionela. The last comment to you, Skip, regarding the Arctic and the potential for escalation in that region as well. How do you see that?
Thanks, Amanda. First off, High North is obviously very, very different. It's distinct. It's been an area of focus for a long time, primarily because of the fact that it's a access point for Russia to threaten the North Atlantic sea lines of communication, the northern allies before Norway, Finland, and perhaps soon to be Sweden. So it's so it's important for the allies in terms of security. That said, in terms of general principles, NATO has allowed the Arctic Council to take the lead on general, approach to the High North, specifically because so many members of the Arctic Council were allies. More recently, Finland now is a member of both, and soon to be Sweden, and therefore all the members of the Arctic Council, less Russia, will be allies. So there might be a little more harmonization in terms of the Arctic Council discussions, and then in the High North approach from NATO. But Canada, in particular, has been very, very strong against militarization. So it's allowed primarily joint ISR focus, and then of course, sea control, anti-submarine warfare type of focus in the High North, but not necessarily throughout the Arctic region. I think the general interests that are shared by all within NATO is that it should be an area not militarized. It should be open to scientific research and experimentation, economic trade and commerce, and then freedom of navigation writ large. Russia has, recently in the last 10 years, established a joint strategic command. It's based not just surveillance in the Arctic, but also air and missile defense capabilities. So it's begun its militarization. That said, what we've seen since the Black Sea, or since the second invasion of Ukraine, is that Russia has reduced its force structure. It's taken away forces from the Finnish border. It's now taking away forces from Kaliningrad. So, very clearly, it doesn't see that as a potential threat. It doesn't see NATO as an offensive threat, which I think is important and also undermines the original narrative for attacking Black Sea. That's just an aside.
Thank you, Skip. That was actually quite a positive end, actually, to this discussion, to be honest. So thank you for that.
That's the greater Black Sea.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to draw this discussion to an end. I think it was very insightful. Obviously, the security of the Black Sea still remains a significant problem. There's many tasks that NATO and individual countries or different groups of countries can do better or can do more of. I mean, there's many things that can actually be done, not just for the stability of the Black Sea, but for Ukraine, which is first and foremost the most important issue here. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers for coming here today and sharing their really extensive views. I'm very sorry that we didn't actually have enough time to go into more details, but 1.5 hours has become like the sort of absolute limit in Brussels. Normally it's an hour. So thank you for sharing your views. The EPC will be continuing to work on this issue of Black Sea security in different formats. We have a new project related to this issue. So I'm sure you're going to be receiving more information, activities and publications on this topic. I would also like to thank our colleagues at the US mission for their support, their long-time support actually, to EPC through our Transatlantic Challenges project. Thanks again to all of you for coming. I hope that you found the discussion interesting, and I wish you all a very nice evening. Thank you.
Sure.